7 words. That's all it took to send British politics into freefall. One reckless comparison, one camera left rolling. And suddenly, the man meant to silence Nigel Farage may have done the exact opposite. Because this time, the attack didn't land. It detonated, and what followed was not just backlash, but a public revolt that David Lammy cannot control. The moment David Lammy invoked the words Hitler Youth, the balance of power shifted. In British politics, Nazi comparisons are the nuclear option. They are not careless insults. They are career-ending accusations. And Lammy didn't whisper it in private. He said it on camera as Britain watched. The intention was clear. Brand Nigel Farage as toxic. End the debate. Shut down dissent. But instead of destroying Farage, Lammy handed him the most powerful weapon in modern politics. Public sympathy. Nigel Farage didn't shout. He didn't panic. He didn't lash out. He did something far more devastating. He stayed calm. He looked directly into the camera and dismantled the accusation piece by piece. He called it absurd. He called it desperate. And then he asked the question millions of Britons were already thinking. If Labour is winning the argument, why do they keep reaching for Hitler? That question cut deeper than any insult. Because people recognise desperation when they see it. For years, voters concerned about immigration have been dismissed as ignorant, extreme or morally suspect. The same accusation recycled again and again. Racist, bigot, danger. But this time, the mask slipped. Lammy wasn't exposing extremism, he was exposing fear. Fear of a debate Labour no longer controls. The public reaction was instant, not just from Farage supporters, but from ordinary voters who don't like him, don't vote reform, and don't agree with everything he says. Even they knew this crossed a line. Social media flooded with the same message. This is not leadership. This is character assassination. And when politicians reach for smears instead of arguments, people stop listening to anything else they say. Then came the moment that changed everything. Farage responded not with outrage, but with confidence. He warned that this kind of rhetoric is dangerous, that branding political opponents as extremists puts real people at risk, and he was right. Britain has already seen threats, intimidation and violence fueled by political language. Words don't exist in a vacuum. They create permission structures. And millions of voters understood exactly what he meant. Behind the scenes, panic set in. Lammy was forced back in front of cameras. Gone was the bravado. Gone was the certainty. What replaced it was hesitation, backtracking, clarification, the political equivalent of reversing at full speed. He admitted he had no first-hand knowledge, no evidence, no direct experience. In plain terms, he accused a man of Nazi sympathies based on rumour and assumption. That admission didn't calm the storm, it poured fuel on it, because now the story wasn't just about Farage, it was about trust. If the Deputy Prime Minister is willing to say something this explosive without evidence, what else has the public been told that isn't true? What other labels have been applied for convenience rather than fact? Farage didn't need to attack Lammy any further. Labour did the damage to itself. Voters saw a party so desperate to protect its narrative that it abandoned restraint. And once that line is crossed, there is no walking it back. The outrage wasn't manufactured. It was earned. This wasn't a bad interview. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a turning point. The moment millions of people realised the debate they were told was settled was never settled at all. And Nigel Farage didn't destroy David Lammy with insults. He did it by standing still while the establishment collapsed around him. What happened next exposed something far bigger than one reckless comment. It revealed a political system scrambling to contain a fire it started itself. As public outrage continued to grow, Labour's leadership realised the damage was no longer limited to David Lammy. This was now about credibility, consistency and control. And that is when the most revealing moment of all arrived. The Prime Minister was asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Is Nigel Farage racist? For years, the answer from Labour figures and aligned commentators had been automatic. Yes, no hesitation, no nuance. But this time, the response was different. Careful, measured and devastating for Labour's own strategy. No, he said, I do not believe Nigel Farage is racist. Nor do I believe Reform voters are racist. They are concerned about borders. In a single sentence, the entire narrative collapsed. That statement did not just contradict Lammy, it contradicted years of messaging, years of headlines, years of accusations used to shut down debate rather than win it. And the public noticed. Because when the Prime Minister admits that millions of voters are not driven by hate but by concern, it raises an unavoidable question. Why were they treated like extremists in the first place? Why were their fears dismissed instead of addressed? For many voters, this felt like a confession, an admission that the language of racism had been used not as truth, but as a political shield. Nigel Farage seized the moment without shouting, without gloating. He pointed out the obvious. If the Prime Minister now accepts that Reform voters are not racist, then the entire justification for years of smears falls apart. Every clip, every interview, every campaign moment where ordinary people were labelled dangerous suddenly looks dishonest, and trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. Oh, the fallout didn't stop there. When asked about a separate controversial remark from Donald Trump regarding London and Sharia law, the government suddenly refused to play the same game. No accusations, no moral outrage, just silence and avoidance. I'm not going down that road, was the response. And the public saw the double standard instantly. When Farage speaks, Labour rushes to condemn. When powerful allies speak, Labour chooses diplomacy, two sets of rules, one system. And voters are tired of pretending not to notice. This inconsistency has become impossible to defend because people are not asking for perfection, they're asking for honesty. If calling things racist is a serious moral judgment, it cannot be deployed selectively. And if it is deployed selectively, then it loses all meaning. That realisation has spread fast across social media, across workplaces, across dinner tables. The accusation no longer intimidates, it irritates. Meanwhile, as the spotlight remained fixed on Lammy's crisis, something else happened quietly. Policy moved forward. A mandatory digital ID system presented as a solution to illegal work and security concerns. Critics warned it was about control, not borders, surveillance, not solutions, and the timing was impossible to ignore. After years of failing to secure borders, after years of dismissing voters who raised concerns, the government's answer was not reform, but restriction, not accountability, but monitoring. Farage had warned this would happen, that when governments fail to solve real problems, they seek power elsewhere. Over speech, over movement, over ordinary citizens. And suddenly his warnings didn't sound extreme. They sounded predictive. Across the country, frustration hardened into resolve. From small towns to major cities, people felt something had shifted. This was no longer about personalities, it was about respect. About whether citizens are allowed to ask questions without being smeared, about whether disagreement is treated as danger. David Lammy's comment was meant to end an argument. Instead, it reopened a national debate Labour thought it had buried. And in trying to destroy one man's reputation, the establishment reminded millions why they stopped trusting it in the first place.